This short tutorial covers advanced approval trees within Epicor Advanced Requisition Management. We'll be covering basic navigation and configuration of these trees, which criteria can be used to trigger approval, and we'll finish with an example of these multi-dimensional trees in action. Logged in firstly as an administrator, I should be able to see and access the Approvals Maintenance menu. You can see that I have a single approval tree enabled right now for approving requisitions. When ARM's optional AP approval workflow module is installed, users are also able to configure trees specific to AP invoice approval. Also, since ARM supports multi-company setup, note that we could create both requisition and potentially AP invoice approval trees for each company within our organization. Traditionally, ARM offered 3 criteria by which a requisition line could be approved: by the GL account code or a segment of, by the location the request is being generated for, and/or by the category of the request. However, approval can sometimes be even more complex or involve even more criteria than just these 3, so ARM now incorporates what we call advanced approval trees. These new trees can effectively replace the roles of the traditional trees, and their advanced configuration options allow users to configure approval paths with even more granularity and trigger approval based on more criteria than just GL, location, and category. The Maintain Approval Trees button shows us all of the approval trees that currently exist. Of course, only a few of these trees will be active at any one point in time, and keep in mind that in order to configure or edit an approval tree, it cannot be currently active. Let's take a look at an advanced approval tree that I'm currently working on. When I open it up, you'll notice that there are 4 branches to this tree, each with a 1 next to them. This 1 denotes first approval, and essentially means that these trees could all potentially trigger in parallel at the same time, each for completely different reasons. We refer to this as multi-dimensional approval. The first branch of the tree also shows a few indented branches underneath it. This refers, of course, to approval escalation. In this scenario, either Jen or Adam will be responsible for first approval based on specific criteria, and the approval could then escalate if the value of the requisition exceeds Jen or Adam's authorized approval limit. Expanding Jen's node, we can see that she has an approval limit of $1,000 and that she's responsible for approving requisitions at a given location, in this case the location Maine. If we click the criteria, currently set to location code, we can now see a total of 14 criteria by which we could route approval to Jen, far exceeding the 3 criteria previously offered with ARM. So we know that Jen will be responsible for approving any requisition involving the main location, and by expanding Adam's node, we can see that he's configured to be the approver for any requisitions not related to the main location. There are plenty of options here to clearly define the approval conditions, who it goes to, and why. So Jen and Adam approve for the location of the request, but we also have other branches of the approval tree set up for different circumstances. We have a branch configured here which states that any requisition line related to the IT category will also go to Roy for approval. Then another branch for approval of a specific project which Barry needs to approve. And lastly, any requisition relating to the requisition type testing will go to Denham for approval. Remember that a requisition could potentially trigger any combination of these 4 branches and the relevant approvers. So now I activate the tree that I've been working on, and we're ready to look at a live example. So now I've logged in as Maurice, and I've generated a requisition for some PPE. I'm now going to change the requisition type to testing. When I submit the requisition, you'll notice that there is more than one approver. Clicking the hamburger button, we see Jen, but also Denham involved in approving this line of our requisition. By clicking the workflow button, we see a visual representation of why these 2 are involved in approval for this particular requisition line. So here's an example of multi-dimensional approval based on our advanced approval tree. Jen on one approval branch, Denham on the other. But why? If we float over Jen's name, we see that she is involved because she's the first approver for the location of the request. Notice that if the value of the request exceeds her limit, then we may see location approval escalate to Douglas and ultimately Denham. Of course, aside from that, we also have Denham triggered as a first approver given the requisition type was set as testing, which as we saw earlier has its own specific branch in our advanced approval tree. Since they are both first approvers on their respective branches of the advanced approval tree, both Jen and Denham will have automatically received emails prompting them to assess and approve their piece of the requisition. It's worth noting here that approvers can approve or decline requisitions directly from their email. They can also delegate their approval role for times when they're absent, either expectedly or unexpectedly, and their role as an approver can even be replaced entirely with the click of a button, which is very handy when an approver leaves the organisation.